this class of New Testament background. This is going to be our last week on this lesson. And we were looking at the historical background leading to the documentation of New Testament. And we are on the discussion of this Maccabean revolt, which led Jewish people increased hope of having the Messiah coming to liberate. So their desire was to be liberated from Roman Empire, who's basically Gentile, who are ruling their country. And as we have seen, the nation was destroyed twice, actually. North and South, two different nations, but with one country, Israel and Judea, respectively, were destroyed by Babylonian and then Assyrian. And it took another 100 plus years now ruled by Roman Empire. So basically, for hundreds, 400 to 300 years, they are practically without ruling own independent government. So that explains how these people were expecting to become a free, independent state. As we know in the history, it took another couple thousand years to eventually for Israelites to build or establish their own independent state, which happened in 1948. But until then, since the destruction by Babylonian and Assyrian, even though they did live in the land and maintain their own culture and religious faith, but still did not have self-governing independent state. So Maccabean revolt was one of the pretty significant political and militant incident in the history. But in relation to the New Testament writing, it does feed the people with the higher expectation of the Messiah. Now, Rome and the Herods. Now, this is where actually the period of Jesus' lifetime begins. So, Herod rise. These are the Herods are the line of king, but not the legitimate line of king. After a Parthian revolt, Herod, with the Roman support, took Jerusalem in 37 BC and ruled Judea as a Roman client king. So this is the one word that we probably need to understand the New Testament Bible. Client king is a king that is under the political rule of Romans. So the Romans designate this client king, so people will think they'll have their own king, but in reality, these kings doesn't have any political power, but it's just a nominal king. So client king or nominal king or designated or puppet king by Romans. So they are eager to, I mean, not reluctant, but they are eager to follow the instructions of Romans. So instead of the Romans sending Roman king who's going to rule the Israelites or Jews, they are being very diplomatic, and by designating a Jewish king, they're trying to tame or at least decrease the desire to revolt against Romans. So it's a political gesture and diplomatic gesture to have a client king. And these Herods continued to rule until the time of Jesus. And we hear the king, the Herod, in the Bible, in the Gospel. So when we see that Herod, it's not just one king, but there were several Herod family ruling, as a client king for Romans. So that's a political dynamic at the time of Jesus. And even though they had their own king, it's just a name only, and he's like a puppet. So here the responsibility or the rights of client kings. They secure the Roman border. Okay, so they just keep maintain the land, and then keep it to be safe, and they keep order in their kingdoms. As long as these client kings or puppet kings maintain the peace and order in their kingdoms or his kingdom, he was okay. He was granted to have that power of kingship, and they provide nominal tribute and aid when requested. So meaning they're militarily, politically, diplomatically were under the Roman Empire and Roman command. So the Caesar, the emperor, is above the kings. Good. this sort of be the kind of system. So emperor is a bigger, greater king. In us, the East Asian history, usually the Chinese emperor played the position of emperor because they're bigger power, and they have these kings in the surrounding countries. If we look at Korean history, because we have a border with China, this has been going on for many years, and sometimes the Korea, the Joseon dynasty and Korea dynasty, these dynasties sometimes have declared emperorship when they're powerful, but most of the time we were having this emperor to king kind of relationship. So what it means is that when they're Korean kings, even when they want to dedicate their sons to be the king, they have to have permission from Chinese emperor. So that was a kind of relationship we had in history for many, not always, but many years. And same thing with the Roman emperor. Then in the surrounding countries and nations, where Romans colonized, they have these client kings. So what it means is, as complexity of the socio-cultural and political context. So it's not as simple as Jewish nation as a nation of Israel in the Old Testament, or even Judea and Israel in the Old Testament. It was pretty much simple. Just one culture, one political power, and one social structure, nothing else. But when it comes to the time of Jesus, the complexity of the culture, society is increased. So we can use the word like a multicultural and interculture. Multicultural is having many cultures in one society or within one context. So if you live in a certain California, we are in multicultural society. There are many different cultures existing alongside one another. So culture A, culture B, culture C, and they exist alongside one another. In our classroom, this is pretty much multicultural and global. When it's global, it is multicultural. You cannot avoid that. Even though we are trying to communicate in English, but still we have different ethnic groups in here and with a different cultural backgrounds. So Korean is teaching, and we have Vietnamese students, Chinese students, and Turkish students as well. So here Korean student, and I used to have some Japanese student as well. So very multicultural. Intercultural is the concept when they exist cultural, but when they have interaction together and begin to mix these different cultures into one unit of context. So that means, let's say here is a context. There's a one given context, and there are different cultures, but when they begin to merge, mix together, then intercultural dynamic begins to happen. So when we live in Southern California, we must understand how multicultural and intercultural interaction or integration or dynamic exist. We have to realize that. And the small countries like us, Korea, we do in history have many different cultures coming in, because we are in a position of what we call peninsula. Peninsula is usually the place where the cultures come in and end up. It's like a pocket, and cultures come in and it stops there, and then you have to work on those cultures. For example, the major influence came from mainland China. So Chinese culture throughout the years does come into Korea and does influence the way of our cultural existence. But it doesn't end up there. Other cultures does come into Korea in its history. For example, when the Mongolians invaded Korea, and then they ruled Korea for 80 plus years, which means they have much influence to the current existence. So there are some vocabularies that we still use in Korea that goes way back to that Mongolian occupation. And then we had 36 years of Japanese rule. That means also Japanese cultures come in naturally. And after the liberation from Japan, there's Korean War. And in Korean War, Russia comes in north, and then also Chinese come in to help out the North Korea. And then U.S. and other 16 nations around the world comes in, and then they fight war for 3 years, which means at least they have 3 years of influence. And then U.S. stays even after the war until today. So in a military political sense, the presence of the U.S. Forces, Navy, Air Force, and even their armies, they are still stationed in South Korea, which means they are giving a certain degree of cultural influence. So when you look at the history of a nation, that you see these other foreign cultures come in and influence. And if I am correct, Vietnam had the time of ruling by France, right, in its history. So the Vietnamese sandwich, it used the baguette, the French bread. You know that, right? So there are these things that comes in and influence culture. And when we read the New Testament, same thing, that you have to have perspective. It's not just the one culture anymore. In New Testament time, Jesus, he faces all these different cultures already came in. And then, like I said, they have to use the Greek letters, writings, and language to write and document the things that are happening. And they had Roman soldiers stationed in Jerusalem and surrounding areas. So the Romans are there. Even though the numbers are not that many, they still have these. And then there are so-called diaspora keep coming back from into the Jerusalem and Judea from whether it's Assyria and Babylonian background. So these diaspora continues to come in and then have influence. And also, because these land, even though they do have this national borders, yet still they are connected by the land, and they can move in and out, which means there are very frequent the coming in of different cultures. Because if you look at the map, the Israel sits right in the middle, out from these European nations to Egypt. So, I mean, they're like on the way to Egypt, or if they go to Europe, it's on the way. So that means there are very frequent cultural exchange, even though they did not want to. So we want to understand that kind of background as we study some of the New Testament documents. Okay. Herod the Great. This is the guy who was on the seat when, I mean, he's the one who rebuilt the second temple, which was destroyed by Assyrians or by Babylonians, I'm not sure, but no, they rebuilt. This is the king who rebuilt second temple, and he is a mixed kingdom of Jews, Edomians, Samaritans, and Greeks. Prosperous. These words prosperous are the word that are used. This is the one word that is used for those Gentiles who are converted to Judaism and then claim themselves to be Jewish. So by a religion that you can become a Jew. But they had a certain limitation. They cannot go into the inner court of the temple, but they have to stay out at the outer court. Because when you look at the temple in Jerusalem, there's something called, here's a main building, the temple. And this is called inner court. And then there's a so by the class, the woman and children usually are not coming, but women and children are at the outer court, male Jews, 12 years and older, who's been circumcised. They're the ones who are allowed to enter the inner court. And this building, only the priest can go in, and there's a what we call Holy of Holies, the place where only once a year the high priest can go in and then do the sacrifice. So there is a certain degree of levels and the classification of the temple by who you are. So these so-called prosperous cannot go in to the inner court. I think they are allowed out, even outside the outer court. And personal life, complicated, reputation for viciousness. So this guy, the Herod the Great, is very vicious, evil king. One of those evil ones, the bad ones. Okay. Now, when this Herod the Great dies, then there is a division. Judea, Idumea, and Samaria are divided and then ruled by his sons. Then Antipas, he's the one who ruled Galilee and Perea. He's the one who is alive when Jesus was living and walking and teaching and doing his ministry. So this Antipas is the guy that we want to know. And the guy Philip, the Herod, he ruled northeastern territories. So they divided the land of Palestine into 3 different regions and ruled respectively. So Antipas is the one who is responsible for Galilee and Perea, where Jesus was living and being raised up. Okay, so that's the one information that we want to know as we read the Gospels. He is mentioned, the Herod, the Antipas. So he's the king Herod who is related directly and mentioned in the Gospel. So that just want you to know there, they divide the sons of the Herod the Great divided their land, and they ruled each area respectively. Basically, because the land of Judea was under colonial government of Roman Empire, it is natural for their under Roman administration, whether they liked it or not. And Jerusalem was under Roman governor. And this Archelaus, I don't know how exactly it pronounced, Archelaus, was replaced because he was too brutal. I mean, he was, trying to rule very vicious rule, bad ruler. And then the Jews were having problem with this guy, and then the emperor heard about this, and then, okay, now you come back to Rome and we'll send another governor. Okay. Roman rule continuing. There is misconception of a Roman governance. small garrison, only about 2,500 locally raised militia. They're the ones who ruled. And then Jerusalem Sanhedrin ran day-to-day affairs. And tetrarchies, we just saw, dividing into three divisions by the sons of King Herod. Antipas will remain nominally independent under their client princes. Now, what it means, what it's trying to say is, the government of Roman government at the time of Jesus, they said this, okay, as long as you guys don't make a trouble, we are not going to go into your land and do any like a military campaign, or gonna, having saying about how you run your own region or country. So that means, okay, you can rule your country, you can have your own religion, as long as you are peaceable. You don't make a trouble. That was kind of a state. So only 2,500 military power to rule whole Palestine. That's not many. So you don't see Roman soldiers that much. But like in the Jerusalem and the what's that? Suddenly I can remember. The city of the Romans in the north of Galilee, they had like some military presence. Roman soldiers are there, but other lands there are no Roman soldiers practically. And so what it means is that Sanhedrin, which the Nicodemus was one of the member, they basically ruled. So they had a religious power, political power as well. So that's how the Sanhedrin was. Because we want to know it because the Sanhedrin was mentioned several times in the Gospel, New Testament. Silent years. This period we call as the silent years are those 400 years. It is silent in the scriptural sense or religious sense because there is no prophetic revelation from God in between until the John the Baptist. So John the Baptist is the very first one who spoke in the name of the Yahweh, saying, this is the word of God. And then his message was simple enough. The time has come, and the Messiah is coming, and you repent. You repent and be baptized. So that was the message of John the Baptist after 400 years. But politically speaking, and socially speaking, and culturally speaking, there is no silent years for human existence, or for the matter, existence of any countries. It cannot be silent. There's always something going on. So the question mark there means, yeah, we can say it's silent. God has been silent for 400 years, but the Jewish people, both the Israel and Judea, were having their own existence, continuing with many things going on. So we're not going to go into deep about these silent years, but there are some few characters. As if you look beyond the religious or prophetic aspect of God being silent, you have to widen your views and see into these 400 years, what had happened. And then you can see different perspectives from different historical writings, and there are some additional facts as you do so-called historical study of these silent years. And so that's like a book of Malachi would be probably the last prophetic book in the Old Testament, which was written around 400 year BC, and until the John the Baptist, his public ministry, which began probably about 6 months to 1 year earlier than Jesus' ministry, there are 400 years. And so when the Matthew begins his writing, it's different from scholar to scholar. John the Baptist, or birth of the ministry of Jesus, would be the first revelation the Israelites hear about the first time after since the 400 BC. So practically it's 430, 450 years, depending on which position you're. So without revelation, without prophets, because God is silent, there's quite a different speculations or suggestions about the coming of Messiah. Because throughout the history of in Jewish history, since the invasion by Babylonian and then Assyrians, where they no longer have a nation, their expectation toward the coming of a Messiah is very high. And this 400 years of silence, your expectation increase and increase, and they think the time is right for the Messiah to come. And okay, so depending on even though the prophetic words were not there, there is another perspective, okay, military, political, diplomatic, and other aspects. There's a very loud things happening until the coming of the Messiah. Okay, let's skip this. This is basically the repetition of the same thing with a little different spot. Now, here's the thing that we want to look at the end of the class. This is 10th week, so we'll focus on this. Now, period of Jesus' lifetime. When Jesus was born and raised and walking and talking and teaching those 30 plus years, we don't know what went on when Jesus was alive. So this is the thing that we want to look. Because most of the Gospels is the writing at the time of Jesus, even though it was written after Jesus was gone, like a 50 some AD to 60 AD. Yet what had gone, the narrative and story itself is written in the gospel. So we want to look into those things. What had happened in the Jesus' lifetime. Okay, first thing is the Herod and the Pilate. These are the political, military powers and also diplomatic powers at the time. Even though we try to live our own private life, but the reality is we are pretty much greatly influenced by this military and political and diplomatic developments that had gone. For example, let's go back to the clock about 30 years from now. In the like 80s, the Chinese students are rarely allowed to come and study in the States. And diplomatic relationship with Vietnam was made much later than with China. So the same thing. Probably 30 years ago, it's rare thing to see Chinese students or Vietnamese students coming in to the classroom, especially in seminary classroom in America. That's not easy things to see. So that means we are influenced by these political development that goes on, whether we like it or not. Same thing in the time of Jesus. Even though you try to live your own private life and don't want to be bothered by these political things that goes on, but the reality is you cannot escape. For example, probably you heard about the May 18th, the civil revolution happened in the Gwangju area in 1980, when Korea was under Chun Do-hwan, the President Chun's. It's the beginning of that thing. So we had to have the school closed for whole semester after that May revolution at Gwangju area. So, even though you're just college student, you are affected by what goes on politically in the country. So is Jesus. He tried to teach and be just a Messiah. But his messianic presence or messianic life is interrelated to what goes on politically. And then he was killed and indicted and killed or executed by the Roman government, who probably has nothing to do with the Jews until most recent years when Jesus was born. So Romans comes into the story, and then King Herod. See, Herod is the Jewish king, but he's not really pure Jewish king. So we need to understand those things that went on. Okay. Roman policy allowed natives of their territory to rule themselves. So Herod ruled the nation. Herod the Great, an Idumean of Edomite, was to rule as king over the Jews in Palestine, tried to make the Jews happy. See, Edomite. Edomite is considered the enemy of Jews. In the if you read the Old Testament history, Edomites are the ones who continue to fight against Israel, the nation of Israel and Judea. And he's a descendant of these Edomites. So, pure, strict Jewish point of view, fundamental Jews don't accept Herod as their Jewish king. Period. And then Pilate is the governor of Jerusalem and the land of Judea at the time of Jesus, and he is also a Gentile. What the significance of these two characters, both Herod and Pilate, is in the Old Testament? There are several prophecies regarding the Messiah. The Messiah is going to be persecuted and be harmed by a Gentile or Gentiles. So that prophecy is fulfilled when both the King Herod Antipas and the Pilate, who is a Roman, persecute and judge, indict, and sentence Jesus to be hung on the cross. So that would fulfill the prophecy of the Old Testament. There are not many, but several prophecies regarding the Gentiles that are the one who is going to harm the Messiah. Okay? And the thing is, he is the one, the Herod, the family of Herod, let's say it that way, the family of the Herod, they are the ones who built temple. That's pretty ironic. No pure Jews, he's not a pure Jew, is building the temple for Jewish people, which is the holy place. And so it's ironic, and I think there is a spiritual implication to it, because is God, Yahweh, going to recognize this temple as a genuine or pure temple of God? And there's a question regarding that. Okay. So Herod the Great, again, he was like very cruel, and he's the one who killed 2 of his wives and 3 of his sons. It's kind of crazy guy, not normal. He even ordered killing of the innocent babies around Bethlehem. So when Jesus was born, he was the king, and then he ordered to just kill everyone who's under age of 2. Okay, let's stop here, and let's take a break for 10 minutes, and please come back after 10 minutes. We'll continue our discussion then. Okay, let us continue. Okay, we'll continue our discussion. The second hour of last week, week number 10, and we're discussing about the Herod the Great, the evil, cruel king of Israel or Judea under the Roman colony. Okay. Now we will look into the Herod Antipas. He is the king of Judea in the time of John the Baptist and the time of Jesus when they were doing their ministries. The King Herod Antipas was accused by John the Baptist because of his adultery. And even Jesus called him the king, the fox. So when these things happen, and put yourself in the seat of this king, and he'll be like, you're one of the political enemies. And the thing is, these are just, John the Baptist and Jesus are not just a citizen. They are nobody. They are not. They had followers. John the Baptist had his own group of disciples who are being with them and being trained, but he had a multitude of people following him and then trying to listen to his teaching. Even worse, Jesus was bigger, he's more popular than John the Baptist. So, they are like today's celebrity, famous entertainers. When they are not like doing music or they're not singers or actors, but they are teachers. These teachers do have big and great influence on the way of thinking. So they are, whether they like it or not, John the Baptist and Jesus became political power figure. And it is natural for the King Herod Antipas to feel threatened as a political risk. So he was watching. Not only just watching, we see the evidence in the New Testament. Herod the Antipas had hired these eyes and following Jesus and John the Baptist wherever they go, and whatever they are saying, these sort of spies, political spies, they followed Jesus and recorded everything and reported those things to Herod Antipas. So again, he felt threatened because the thing, as time goes by, these things, it dies down by itself. But the popularity of Jesus grew day by day, year by year. And everyone is talking about Jesus. So, when you're sitting in a palace and you're hearing this report of Jesus gaining popularity and thousands and thousands of people, I mean just counting only male adults as 5,000 who are following Jesus and being fed, which means there's at least 10 times more of children and women following Jesus at the time of, feeding of 5,000. So actually it's not feeding of 5,000, it's a lot more than that. We're sure. So, and eventually Jesus stood trial before Herod Antipas at the time of his passion. He couldn't avoid that. Even though he did not directly in front of the Herod, he was tried and by the Pilate. Okay? Pilate, the governor, Roman governor, who ruled the Judea, whole land of Judea, and he was residing in the Jerusalem, because that is the center of the whole Judea. Pontius Pilate, the governor during Jesus' trial. Later, Roman governors mentioned in the New Testament of Felix and Festus. So these are the governors who are following the Pilate. But Pilate, the Pontius, is the one who sentenced Jesus to be hung and killed on the cross. So he is the one who is responsible. As you read these gospel stories, probably he wasn't really willing to do that. He wanted to avoid it as much as possible, because this was not a political issue, but it was more like a religious issue, because the Pharisees and the priests are the one who's trying to indict Jesus and try to give him the trial. And as we read the story, we know that Pilate wanted to avoid it as much as possible. But eventually, because they didn't want to put blood on their own hands, they took Jesus to Pilate's court. And to do so, they made him a political revolt kind of figure. So it becomes a political crime when you're calling yourself the king of Judea or king of Israel. And Jesus, he did not himself, never claimed himself to be the king of Judea, but they crowned him with the crown of thorn and put the name tag on the cross and the king of Israel, or king of Judea. So they are the ones who put that name level on him, but Jesus never claimed himself to be the king directly. But I believe that the Iscariot Judas, he's the one who, kind of reported, okay, Jesus said that he's the king, because he talked about the kingdom. When you talk about the kingdom, and he's trying to build this new kind of kingdom, then he tried to be a king of that kingdom. So that's how they indicted him for the political revolutionary. So that's the political background of the story. Now, another political / religious the power body at the time of Jesus is called Sanhedrin. It's not exactly like today's assembly or the Senate or any of that nature, but it did serve a pretty similar function. It's a group of leaders or elders at the time of Jesus, about 30 to 33. It depends on when the time of the history, but roughly number of 30 male elders, wise men, usually Pharisees, who come together and make decisions about the political matters and religious matters of the Judea, the Jerusalem, and the land of Judea. So it functions as a highest court and also as a senate or assembly, and then the papal meeting at the Roman Catholic Church. I mean, it's pretty similar to that. So again, it's a high court of Jews in Palestine and was allowed to govern in things relating to the daily life of Jews. So it didn't have any political power, the diplomatic power, but had a certain level of political power regarding the routine, daily, social, cultural, religious matters that are related to governing the land of Palestine or the Judea at the time. So again, simply saying, these members in Sanhedrin are powerful next to the king. Sometimes more powerful than king regarding the religious matters and issues. But, now here's the but. The problem is the Sanhedrin at the time is corrupt, and they were very legalistic, and they tried to maintain and sustain their own, the faith. They didn't listen to the King Herod. So they did not have that, voice to go against the king. They should have. And so the check and balance did not exist, especially when the time of the Herod the Great. He was a tyrant, a very dictator kind of king. So Sanhedrin did not function as it should. But in the time of Jesus, when they had the 3 small kings ruling each 3 different regions of Palestine, they had a little probably better voice than when they were under the king, the Herod the Great. So, but yet, the Sanhedrin more focused on the religious functions than the political function. So as we see in the case of Nicodemus, who was named, one of the named Sanhedrin member in the time of Jesus, we see that he is rather a religious figure than a political figure. So that kind of helps us to have a better understanding of the Sanhedrin at the time of Jesus. Okay? Roman Emperor. During the time of Jesus, it was Augustus, and he's the one who also called, they made that call to Mary and Joseph to come to Bethlehem and have that, population registration or census, population census. So he, and then also his another name for Augustus was Octavius, and he ruled, 27 BC to 14 AD, which means until Jesus was like a young youth, teenager, he was the king. So when Jesus was born, which probably is 3 BC or 4 BC, we assume that Jesus was born in 1 AD, but in the scientific, historical counting, it is more likely that he was born in 4 BC rather than 1 AD. Then Tiberius follows in the time of Jesus. So let's say Jesus was crucified at the age of 33, which will be in our the modern calendar would be AD 30 AD. So this guy falls to the date when Jesus was crucified. Okay. Another way of saying is Jesus went through 2 different Roman emperors, and then probably several more Roman governors at the time of Jesus' lifetime. Okay. Now, Apocrypha. This is a more of a about the New Testament and the Bible. What we have today is 27 books of New Testament. There are some other books that are considered as scripture, and if you have a Roman Catholic background, there are several more books that are added to Protestant Bible, and those are called Apocrypha. And these books are written in intertestamental period, meaning before the Christ, and there's some of the books are written after Christ. For example, the Gospel of Thomas, supposedly written by the disciple named Thomas, right? And those are that book is also included in the Apocrypha. The best known books are called Apocrypha, and the word Apocrypha is Greek for the hidden, and some of the Apocrypha were included in the Septuagint, and there resulted confusion. So there are some additional books other than the 39 Old Testament books and then 27 New Testament books. So those extra testamental period books, which follows the Old Testament books, and then after the post-New Testament, some of the books written in the New Testament era that are added to the scripture, and those are called Apocrypha. And Jerome is another figure after Jesus. We'll just many of the writings of Jerome are considered important in understanding the New Testament. It helps us to understand the New Testament, and especially in a historical aspect. But let's say, okay, Jerome tried to set the record straight, and then apocryphal books might be read in the church, but that they should not be thought of as having authority like the books of the Bible. So the Jerome is one of the leader in what we call Eastern Church, and then he said these apocryphal books are not the same as the canon. Canon means standard. And we have a brand named Canon with just one N, which took from this word canon. When we say canon, it means those 39 books and the 27 books in the New Testament. So 66 books. Those scriptural writings other than 66 books are not included in the so-called canon. So Jerome set the record straight and says these are not, we will not consider them as absolute or valid as these 66 books that we have. Okay, let's go to we will try to conclude our lesson with this lesson 2. When you're reading the New Testament and a New Testament background, the major background, other than historical and geographical, political background and such, would be the Old Testament. So without having the knowledge and understanding of Old Testament, I would not say it's impossible, but it would be rather difficult to have a better or correct understanding of New Testament. So if you just keep studying the New Testament only, then there's always that danger of misinterpreting the New Testament messages. So it is a must to have some fundamental knowledge to the core elements in the Old Testament. It's not just a story of Noah and Moses and Abraham and so on. I mean, it's much more than that. Old Testament, for example, first 3 books, 3 chapters in the book of Genesis is the key to understanding the whole Bible. Most of Christians, even Christians, I mean non-believers of course, but most of Christians think Genesis chapter 1 and 2 and 3 are just kind of old myth, like a story. It's good to read, but there isn't much element to it. That's a very big mistake. Or they think it's narrative about the creation. First day God created us, and the second day God created this and that, and then seventh day He rested. That's pretty much all the knowledge that we have about the first three chapters of Genesis. It's not so much about God made something, but it's much more than that. For example, I lead like a weekend Bible study with the younger Korean American young people for last 10 years. And one of the things that I do with these people begin with is to begin study of Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3, which we had like every other week Saturday classes, and it took us like almost 1.5 years to cover those 3 chapters, which means it's that much deep. It's not just the story of God creating or showing how powerful God is. Of course, it does show how powerful God is by reading those creation story, but there's much deeper and systematic truth to this chapter 1 and 2 and 3 of Genesis. So, Old Testament as the background of New Testament. Of course, it is. It's the background of New Testament. So it's a must. Criticality of Old Testament for New Testament. Genre and styles. There are at least 5 different genre and styles in the Old Testament. For example, there's narrative, there's poetry. We read the poetry, right? There's prophets, major and minor. And there are what we say the wisdom literature. For example, the story of Job is considered both narrative and the story of the book of wisdom. Proverbs is a good example of the book of wisdom, right? The reason that we need to look into it is, number one, some of these Old Testament passages are quoted by Jesus himself. And then also in the letters of the Paul. In the letters, there are some Old Testament quotes. And in the Gospels, there are a few other quotes that were brought from the Old Testament. So, which means that we gotta know. And in the Gospels, there's a words or phrase like the son or descendant of the King David. To have the understanding of that word or phrase, then you need to go back and read the story of King David and to know what it means. So, genre and styles, and it all relates to the gospel stories and then some writings in the New Testament. Now, narratives of Genesis 1 through 3. I just talked about it, right? These 3 books, including the story of Adam and Eve being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, these are basically the overview of what is going to happen in the future. So, Genesis chapter 1 and 2, 3, it's not just the creation story, it's a prophetic story of whole human history. So please try to read them again from that perspective, because it does tell you what's going to happen to us human beings. Because the very first word in the Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 says, in the beginning, which means there's going to be the end. And for example, see the day and night. There comes the morning and evening. There's those phrases repeated 6 times. 6 times in the chapter 1 of Genesis. And the 7th day, there's no morning and evening. So, what's the morning and evening? Is it about just one day? My understanding is about the history that we are going to experience. And we are at the the day 6, because Jesus is being the morning star. He did come and the morning of 6th day, and then we'll go through the evening, and then next morning will be when Jesus comes back, which will begin the 7th day, the day of Shalom. So that Shalom will continue forever, and there's not going to be no more morning and evening. So that's kind of example how this the story in the chapter 1 and 2 are the overview of human existence and the human history. It serves also as a table of contents. When you open a book, any book, and you will see this table of contents, the introduction, the short, outline of the whole book. So the Genesis 1, 2, and 3 serves just like those table of contents. So without having the understanding, correct perspective of Genesis 1, 2, and 3, that you are not going to be able to understand the whole Bible. The other way around, if you're trying to understand the Bible correctly, then you need to go back to the Genesis 1, 2, and 3 and give a very serious study on those documents. So it is a table of contents, it is a summary, and it provides a paradigm for the whole Bible. For example, Genesis chapter 1 verse 3 and 9, then it talks about but prior to that, it does talk about so the light and darkness. You have the light and the darkness. So the question is, what is it? It gives a whole paradigm of human existence. We do have, in this existence that we live in, the light and the darkness coexist, which is not possible. When you have the light, the darkness is gone. But in our existence, as you experience in yourself, you see the darkness and light coexist. Even after we are born again, becoming a Christian, still, there's that darkness still remaining, sometimes being completely dark. So the question would be, what is the darkness and what is the light? And then it is called day and night. So darkness is called the night, and light is called day. And that is one paradigm for good and evil. So these things, night, day, light, goodness, night, darkness, and evil are all related and connected. And there are other biblical paradigms that are embedded or hidden, or actually it's not so hidden. You study and you see, this is what it is about. So then it has a historical plot, just like I explained. So it's good for you to study these Genesis 1, 2, and 3 very seriously, and then it will help you to understand the whole Bible much better and much properly. Then we have in the Old Testament the laws of the Israelites, which is mentioned many times in the New Testament as well. Jesus condemning Pharisees for being legalistic and being hypocritic. It all has to do with the law. What is the law? When you have the law in the Bible, it means first 5 books of the Old Testament. And these Testament does include the law. And if you are a Jewish male, a boy, you are asked to memorize these 5 books before you become 12. And there are like these scribes going to ask you the question, interview you, and see. Now you memorize the story of Moses, and then you begin from Exodus and try to recite all these stories. And then you ask, tell me about the law regarding the Sabbath. And then you are to, memorize and say that. So these are the fundamental, the key elements to the Jewish existence. We do not understand the depth and the seriousness of the law in the life of Jewish people at the time of Jesus. And it governs, it controls, and it gives you the structure and the paradigm of your existence. So the law is very important. And then Jesus sounds like he's prohibiting or destroying and then, making nothing of the law. But he said, I'm trying to complete the law. That's what Jesus said. I'm not saying the law is not worthy. No, he's not saying that. He's trying to complete the law. So what we try to understand is that the reality and existence, the paradox of reality, and then less evil. Less evil. That's a word that we use today, but what is evil though? That's one of the key questions, one theological and doctrinal question, and also it is a very practical and the question of existence for us believers. And for me, the evil, the biblical definition of evil is your motive. You're the reason. Your reason for doing or saying or thinking anything. So if we're a human being, we are not, living or acting or saying anything by inborn or innate nature. Innate, meaning something that's born with. Animals, they live and act by their instinct or innate nature. It's natural. You have no control over it because it's biological. Us human beings don't do that. We have reason or reasons for doing something. And evil is doing something or saying something or thinking and all these things that your existence caused by your own selfishness, trying to feed and fulfill you. So if you are in the center of your existence, then you are evil. And the thing is, the modern culture, the society, is telling you to live for yourself, be yourself. Of course, you should be yourself. You cannot be someone else. But we do not live for your own good or your own ego or try to feed your own greed. And when that happens, then you are evil. It sounds very, unreasonable, but the Bible is teaching you are not to live for yourself, but you're to live for others. Living for others, giving your time, your energy, your money to help and support and to benefit for someone else. That is what the love is. That is what the goodness is. And anything that is against that is called evil. So evil is not some, bad actions. Of course, that is included in evil, but the essence of evil, from me, my biblical understanding is self-serving or being self-centered or being selfish. All these things that making you an idol. See? Idolatry is the worst and most common, but most forgotten and most defended, compromised, or reasoned. Idolatry is serving yourself. That is, biblically speaking, it is evil. So all the things that happen that are evil comes out of you. It's not from Satan. I mean, some theology says it is Satan who's evil and we are affected by evil. Therefore, you can blame Satan for all the things that are evil. That's not the case. The Bible does not teach that. Bible teaches you are evil. You are the source evil. Evil is not something God created. Never. God cannot create evil because he's never evil. And evil is going against God, which means that you're self-worshiping yourself. So that is the biblical definition and understanding of evil. And it's that, strict. The Bible is that much strict. And Bible never teaches to serve you or yourself. And condemnation. The law, the function of the law is to condemn. And it shows who we are, how evil, how bad, how unrighteous we are. So even though you can be righteous if you keep the law, the thing is you cannot. There is 600 almost 700 different laws in the existence of Israelites. And even if we keep all the written laws as it is, all the instructions, regulations, but there is one issue. How about your mind? How about your soul? How about your inside, true you? Are you really, doing all these things because you love them, love these people? The answer is no. You may be, yes, 99 times, but if you're not doing it for the love of that person and just doing it for the sake of keeping the instruction one time, then we are not perfect. So what Jesus is teaching us is you cannot be perfect because we are living in this sinful, corrupted world. So condemnation is almost automatic. We cannot avoid to be condemned by the law. So to understand the message of Jesus, fingering these Pharisees and condemning them and say, you are all the sons of the snakes or venoms, that, is understandable because no one is perfect and they try to be like if they are perfect. We call it hypocrisy, right? Or self-righteousness. So self-righteousness and hypocrisy and being legalistic are all condemned because of the law. It gives us the standard of parameters and barometers of what is right and what is wrong. But it does not give you whether you're good or evil. Good or evil is only determined behind and beyond the law. Even some of us are good Christian in a church standard. You attended Sunday worship and you don't miss any of the functions of the church, and you give 1/10 of your earnings every month, and then you participate all these leadership training and so on, but that doesn't make you a righteous. And the biblical the parameters or the standard for us is what happens in your heart, what motivates you. So that will be the key to biblical understanding, whether it's Old Testament or New Testament. Okay, so the time's up, and this will conclude our 10 weeks survey and discussion about the New Testament background. Whatever is left over, you can study yourself. I think I've given pretty much enough resource to continue your effort in the New Testament study. Okay, let's take a